live today.
Welcome to Perspective Shift.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. We got a special guest with us here today, guys.
Yeah.
We're excited to kick this week's episode off.
Kai, me and Mike just met him today. You know?
Correct.
Yeah.
Today was our first time interacting with Kai here.
Yeah. So, Karen, I've been together with Karen for 10 years now.
Yep.
Everyone that listens to our podcast, there's some
They
point,
know Karen.
Yeah, there's some point. They've never met her, but there's some point I always make some
Some sort of comment?
Yeah, some comment that, Karen loves me for.
Yep.
But I like to keep her in mind. So, but yeah, she...
Tell us how you met Karen, because that's how we were introduced to Kai.
She was my teacher, humanities teacher, when I was going to Corona del Sol.
Nice.
My senior year, and that was one of the only classes to hold my attention.
Yeah.
Nice.
We have something in common. Karen's
Shout
the
out
only
to
woman
Karen.
that holds my attention.
There you go. There you go.
I know she's gonna be listening later, so I said.
you got to stick it in there.
So, what year did you graduate Corona?
2019.
Okay, cool.
Oh wow, all right.
So you've been out of school for quite some time.
Well,
yeah.
Yep.
3 years. Yeah.
Yep.
3 years.
yeah, right before COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were the year before COVID. All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was the last year that had
All
a
right.
normal graduation, if you can call that normal.
All right.
Yep.
And so, all right, Kai, let's get into the journey you're on right now.
Yeah.
So I guess it started in there's no chronological start to these things.
Yeah.
But as far as I can tell, it started in 2020.
Okay.
I was very just suffering a lot, really stuck in my own shit.
Yeah.
All right.
And I talked to a friend of mine, and that was the first time she really snapped me straight.
Okay.
And she told me that I was obsessed with my shit, and it was also the first time. It was after the first night she had done LSD for the first time.
Okay.
Oh.
And I could tell she had some sort of clarity. I could see like a light in her. And after that, I kind of began this path of like self-healing and trying to just sort of mend myself. And one of the things that I found on this path, or one of the things that kind of like called me, was doing mushrooms.
Okay.
Were
you experienced with any like cannabis or anything but prior to this?
Yeah, I was experienced with cannabis.
Okay.
I think cannabis was something that was given to me to help me get ready for that.
Okay.
Because drugs were already a part of my repertoire of, burying my pain. So I figured shrooms.
Very common too. I mean, this is something everybody out there deals with or runs into at some point in life.
100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did shrooms, mushrooms, golden teacher mushrooms.
Okay.
And it opened my eyes
All right.
truthfully for the first time. And I felt more present, more aware, calmer, felt better than I probably ever had in my entire life. And
what year was that?
This was in 2020, in
Eyes wide open, 2020 vision.
July, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was the day of Midsummer, actually. I think
Okay.
the 26th of
Okay.
July.
Very cool.
All right.
That might be in June, though.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have checked that. And the thing that really baffled me was that that lightness that I felt in my mind stuck around for about a week. It felt like a knot in my head had sort of loosened up a little bit, and I could just sort of think and see much more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of began a journey with psychedelic drugs.
Okay.
And I had a very formative trip in October, also with mushrooms, where I perceived to have met God.
Okay.
I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and there was a mountain of light and gold with one huge cartoon eyeball staring down at me.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
And I felt an intense love, like a pressurized love that was like pressing against the walls of my consciousness.
Nothing like you've ever felt before.
Nothing like I've ever felt before.
And I like how you use the term cartoon-like eye, because the speculation of all the cartoons that we grew up with usually came from people who wrote them, whatever, were on type of some psychedelic trip. Right?
For sure, yeah.
So That's why,
eyes
this
wide
is
open.
bizarre. Yeah, children understood it though, without having to do it, because we weren't chained down to the ideas, the concepts that were the framework of civilization yet.
Well, a lot of our cartoons are consciousness based. You know, when you
Yeah.
see them, fighting and doing all this
especially
stuff.
Beavis and Butthead.
But when somebody's not a care in the world, going through like a very treacherous situation, but just mousing through
That's
it.
Mr. Magoo.
Well, Mr. Bean, all that type of stuff. But there's truth to that.
Yeah.
And no matter how hectic it gets out here in the 3D, where the place we're coming from is how we're experiencing life.
Yeah, and then searching for that childlike state again.
Yeah.
So, what kind of childhood did you have?
Yeah. Tell us about
what
you.
kind of upbringing did you have?
It was pretty unremarkable, to say the least.
All
My
right.
parents were good parents.
All right.
They didn't do anything horrible to me.
Yeah.
They did their best to love me as well as they could.
Yeah.
And the problem was inside of my mind. The problem was that I was stuck in my own shit. I was wrapping myself around with my thoughts. I didn't trust the love that I was being given. And I couldn't find what I was looking for. It seemed like since a very young age I was looking for something, or was kind of disillusioned with the world that I was in.
Yeah.
Disillusioned in the sense, I know there's more out there, or I'm in pain. Like, what type of disillusion?
Disillusion, like I didn't know that there was more out there. I thought that what was in front of me was the only thing that there was, and that this sort of papery, empty life was all I would know.
Yeah, and that is scary. And
It
I
is.
think we all come up against that. Obviously, me and Mike are
Everybody feels that.
doing
at
this
some point.
podcast, so we made breakthroughs as well in our life. Mine was a lot older than yours, a little bit. I broke through, but yeah, you realize there's more to it than this, and then the journey begins.
Yeah. That was the important thing about psychedelics, is it showed me that there was something more out there.
Outside of this 3-dimensional experience that we call reality.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, because I didn't start doing psychedelics till later on. Like, I think the first psychedelic trip I had was like 3 years ago. And that was on
Really?
ayahuasca.
See, my first psychedelic experience was much earlier on, but I was a musician, so drugs and rock and roll go hand in hand. So it was the type of thing I was introduced very early to psychedelic drugs. In fact, I didn't begin to appreciate my psychedelic experiences until after I, quote unquote, found my way and found myself and realized, there's a lot more to this. I was just more looking for an escape of that suffering that you were talking about, Kai.
And the thing that I want to say, you mentioned outside of this 3D realm, is that peace and joy that I found, it was inside the realm. It was like living and breathing on the walls and the ground that I walked was this light and energy that was just free for me to take and free for me and abundant and ever loving. And there was nowhere that I had to go because I was already there.
Very well
Yeah,
described.
there's no searching. You are that in which you...
Was this before or after, or was this during mushrooms that you experienced this? Or was this after the effects of mushrooms?
During mushrooms, I experienced it, but when I was that week or so after I had come down from that trip, I just noticed that there was a lightness. And of course, after a couple days, a week or so, that lightness faded, and I was still and I was very much clinging to that experience that I had.
Yeah.
But that was still there, and I had seen through the veil, as Ramdas would say.
Yeah. So you knew there was something. You actually knew there was something there, and you were part of it.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, how do I remain there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the journey of the spiritual. And we're all spiritual beings, we know that.
Once you have that type of experience, though, that's when you're able to, you understand that there's more. And then it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started to understand and learn these concepts, on an analytical thinking mind level, that is what gave me the will, the drive, the juice, the energy to experience on such a greater level,
Yeah, because at some point you have to drop the intellect and just...
That's it, and you have to move beyond the thinking mind.
And it doesn't have to be psychedelics that bring you there. People get experiences like that in meditation,
ballet.
Basically anything.
Yep.
I remember when I was in dance.
Perfect example.
Yeah, being able to line my body up with the choreography that I was given filled me with this like ecstasy.
Yeah.
That I was just, while I was doing the work, there was nothing really going on besides that.
Yeah, and then, you know, throughout my lifetime, having conversation with certain people, and I would always think as a child, I would have these ecstasy experiences all the time, but just in the assumption that everyone else was having them, so I never really, I didn't know intellectually to even talk about it, and I assumed everyone else was having it. But then you get older, you hear different stories, and you know, kids growing up in really rough homes and stuff like that. But then I started talking to people that had really brutal lives in what we consider, from a standpoint of society, but yet they would still have the same understanding, the same feeling when they were young kids. So this comes in. They will understand the situation wasn't idealistic at all, but they had a sense of this freedom because they were present in the moment. They weren't naturally futuristic. And I believe that's what it is. We're trying to come back to that because we were taught future as in the society, and there really isn't a future.
That's what we're always planning and working towards.
Yeah,
something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, we're in the moment. We start to fall into that place. Again, we're part of a game, I believe. You know, obviously, you got to think of tomorrow or the appointment like you're, you know, have to be somewhere. But in the moment, you can actually just rest assured that come that time where the time linear perspective hits, I will be there, and I'll be there prepared. And that's what I've learned, because I kind of did the opposite. Wasn't really into drugs. They were all around me, but I tried a couple things, never really worked for me. But it was the death of my brother who brought me to an understanding. I'm like, this can't be all there is, because I was doing everything perfectly right, and and then all of a sudden that happened, and it just shattered the concept of my life. And then from there, I started trying to read everything. I was trying to intellectualize is what I was trying to do. And then even like before I did ayahuasca, I studied for 5 years. You know, like that, you should have studied for 5 minutes and just did it. I'm like, oh, it's just, I had to overcome that. And when I did, there was this wild breakthrough. Yeah. But my breakthrough was I met God, and then God sent me down to the illusionary aspect of hell. And I went down there and realized there isn't hell. It's just a concept. And I kind of laughed at it because it was somewhat uncomfortable, but there really wasn't anything, as we call hell, other than what society brought into my head. And when that was completely dissolved, I started laughing. So it was like God showed me the scariest dream I've ever had and says, it's just a dream. And I realized, oh my God. And that was 3 years ago. I've done mushrooms before, after that, but I'm still learning from that trip I had 3 years ago, and it's pretty wild.
Kai, have you ever experienced ayahuasca?
No.
That's one I've never tried either. I'm
in circles that use it, but I don't really think it'll be a part of me for a little bit longer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's like... I believe it's like where you are right now. Like you shouldn't anticipate having to do anything in the future because, you look at what Ram Dass. He started out with LSD and then he came to a point where he'd never done it again.
Well, he still did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He like he would talk about how he would do it like every year, every couple years.
He kept up with it even when he was in Hawaii.
I heard a story. One of his caretakers, when Ram Dass died. He put a little bit of holy ash and a tab of LSD on his tongue.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
And,
That's funny. I didn't know that.
And, yeah, Ram Dass he very much respected the use of those drugs, and he kept them up into his old age. I don't know about after his stroke, but I know before his stroke, during that time, he was still... Yeah, and he wasn't doing it like he was during his Better Living Through Chemistry days where he was popping tabs every day before work.
Yeah.
Or like doing DMT before lectures.
I think because he was trying to get to the place where his guru was when, the story goes when he gave, and you probably know this story, you've studied it, where he gave the guru, he's like, you have something for me, and he pulled out the LSD.
It was like a whole bottle or something.
He downed it. And Ram Dass was like, and all of a sudden, Ram Dass explains he started doing all these funny faces, and then he was just playing with him.
Yeah.
And he realized, well, if you're already there, so to speak, and that's what Ram Dass' one of his famous sayings is like, if you're in Detroit, you don't need the bus to get there.
Yep.
And I believe, so what I'm assuming is Ram Dass would probably take it to see how close he was from it without having the, because like the first time you take something you've never been there, it's a freak. You get shot of a cannon.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But if you're actually just stepping through a doorway, it means you're already there. And that's the coolest thing. It's like, okay, if I could take this thing and I'm already at the speed of it, kind of like when Einstein was understanding, okay, if I was moving at the speed of light, what would light look like? And I believe that's the realm that Ram Dass was looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, can I be there prior to taking it and getting there?
After the second time after Neem Karoli Baba took the acid, the time when he pretended he went insane. He said this yogi medicine was used by yogis in the Kulu Valley thousands of years ago, but that knowledge is all gone now. He said LSD will allow you to come into the room with Christ. You can pranam, you can have his darshan, but then after 2 years you have to leave. And the only way to stay is love.
That's it.
That's beautiful. See, we grow up in a Western culture. You've lived here your whole life, Kai?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in America, in the Western culture, we have a skewed view on drugs in general, pharmaceuticals, whether that's street drugs, whether that's plant medicine. And now in these last, I would say 10 years or so, and getting even better, we're now starting to look at these for the tools that they are, tools to access, these higher realms, plant medicine, ways to, learn more about yourself. And these are becoming more popular in different retreats and different things that are available. Yeah. And I think that is very needed in our society, because for the longest time, I remember growing up thinking like, why are mushrooms considered illegal? Like, why is this a bad thing? Yeah. This is something that's allowing me to really like go within, to turn around and see this world from a whole different view. And I do think that is becoming more and more socially acceptable. I mean, we see it with just cannabis across the board. Half of our country is a legal recreational state by now, where you can just go in and purchase it. Growing up, that wasn't the case, It was still very much so illegal when we were in school or growing up. And so to kind of see that whole change, I think that is a sign of us evolving on a consciousness level as well, like collective consciousness within our society, if you will.
And what my brother has pointed out to me is that if you want to understand the reason as to why plant medicines are so illegal, you don't really need to look further than big pharma.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Because the God that we're worshiping in this age is money. And especially in this society, and big pharma is looking to make as much money as possible.
Yeah, because even now when they're doing these trials with psilocybin, what's funny is they'll tell you they have to create their own synthetic version.
Correct.
And you know what they tell you? The reason is they need to know the exact dosage as they give it in order to perform a statistical study. It's just another way of them selling something that grows out of the ground. And it is funny because anyone that's ever Terence McKenna, what he brilliantly did was talk about it, intellectualize. And he, I remember he's telling a story and he was talking about cannabis. And he goes, it's very interesting that the 3 drugs that really kill us, our government allowed, which caffeine,
alcohol,
tobacco, and sugar. He didn't even mention alcohol.
Really? Well, also, morphine. And the things that really kill you with an overdose are the heroin.
Yep.
Or the compound derived from the poppy seed. That we've created painkillers with.
Yeah.
And those painkillers are very incompatible with a lot of things, like going about doing your day-to-day tasks or having a drink, which is also very popular in our culture. And we're, as Terence McKenna said, we are red meat, alcohol, painkiller, white sugar.
Yep.
Yeah, and even caffeine, and the what he was trying to present here is like, so we do the nicotine to up into the understanding of so if you want to produce more, make more money, you have to get people to work more. So giving them a coffee break where they'll drink coffee, more caffeine, it gets them through the day. Prior to caffeine even coming into the Western culture, we were drinking low-grade beer because we couldn't trust the water. So you weren't really getting much production out of people. But once it was introduced, sugar, caffeine, and nicotine, all of a sudden people were more hyped. But then he goes, can you imagine trying to get people to work a 12-hour shift that were on cannabis? And they would just come to a place like, why am I making a widget anyway? And I remember him doing this at, he was having this talk at Ashram out in California.
Hell yeah.
And it was an old, it was like in the 70s or whatever. And everyone laughed because everyone knew exactly what he was talking about. There are people that are working and having these jobs that the fear the fear of not bowing to money is why they're stuck in it. It's not because they like it. And but the drugs that they provided to us are the ones keeping us in it. And then after work, what do? You have the alcohol to suppress what you just did. But now when you get into other stuff like psilocybin, cannabis, all of a sudden you're like, why the hell would I do that? Mm-hmm. And then there'll be a different aspect of life. And when I talk to people about this, like a different way of living, they're like, well, what are people going to do for work? And I'm like, well, the concept of work will be completely different. I'm like...
And the concept of work was created.
Yeah, like we think we produce stuff. We don't produce anything. The earth produces it. We just consume it. We just witness it. We just experience with it. So, people have to get over... People are starting to get over the idea that we produce something. I'm like, no, we don't produce anything.
The field produces.
We're part of the experience or the witnessing of the creation, but we don't create it. We let it come, like a musician will let the music come through them.
Well, I'd say that we are the creator.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The me that thinks I am doing this, that's not the creator. That's the victim.
Small
that's the prison, the prisoner.
Yes. Yeah, we call that the ego or the persona.
Yeah. But the awareness that's witnessing this all is a hand reaching out into the world from outside of the world, creating it.
Yes.
Well said.
And that's the in certain I am aspect of who we are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now the minuscule character in which we were actually given, like someone gave you a name, someone told you how to act, and as we overcome that, and let go of that, all of a sudden I could still be identified. Like even Ram Dass would joke, and that's taking a different name, but he still would, if one of his friends would come up and from Harvard and call him Dick, he wouldn't say my name is Ram Dass. Mm-hmm. He'd just play with it, but he understood that was just the identification which the other person needed to use.
Yep.
And he didn't want anyone to be uncomfortable, but Ram Dass was a name that was given to him. Mm-hmm. And then it led him on a different path. Otherwise, Richard Albert was a whole different set of situations he had to deal with if he was under that.
So Kai, you found yourself going down this path, and right now you're in a unique spot. You're about to visit an ashram here shortly, correct?
I'm about to live in an ashram.
Live permanently. Or as long as you can. Yeah.
As far as permanent goes.
Yeah. Define permanent, right?
But yeah, you're going to head out. How soon do you leave for your?
I'm leaving in a week.
Wow, so a week. So now that we kind of have this little background about how you got into these consciousness concepts, began to learn about who you are, etc. What took you that route? How did you find yourself on the path to an ashram?
So after my trip in October, the one with the mountain of gold and whatnot.
Yeah, witnessing God.
I immediately realized that I needed something to explain the experiences that I was having, because my rational mind literally couldn't understand it, and it still can't understand it. But so I went to, and I was on some subreddits that were throwing around some names of authors that psychedelic people were reading, and one of the ones I remember is Ram Dass. Okay. There was another one, I don't remember that one, maybe Alan Watts or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I went to Changing Hands bookstore, and I remember it very distinctly. I looked and I saw the Be Here Now cover. That, if you guys know it, it's the mandala.
We do.
And it says,
absolutely.
with the chair in the center. And I knew immediately that was the book that I was looking for. A light has never turned on so fast for me. And so I took it home and I read the first part of it, where he talks about his experience being a Harvard professor, going through psychedelics and going to India. And through that book, I met Neem Karoli Baba, who's Ram Dass's guru and also my guru.
I love that. So,
and so when you say that was October of 2020, or
October of 2020.
Sorry. So we're coming on 2 years now.
Yes.
So
nice.
It was something you picked up. You're in this book. You're reading it, and then you connect immediately with this. You're like, I know, I feel this, right? And then is it through meditation that you met your guru?
No, it was the story where Ram Dass gave him the acid. The first time he gave him the acid. So he went to his place, and then they had a little Leela thing. Then the next day, Maharaji said, "You have medicine for me?" And he's like, medicine. He thought he was talking about like vitamin B or something like that. And then the guy he was with, Bhagwan Das, says maybe he means the LSD. And Maharaji says, "Acha, the LSD, bring that." And so he gives him 900 milligrams of LSD.
Which, put that into perspective for people.
3 very potent tabs.
Yeah, very potent.
Yeah, and it was Sandoz or like some sort of very pure company. It was still when there was good LSD. Nowadays, the stuff you'll find is not anywhere near as pure.
Yeah.
And he took it, and nothing happened. The story that you were talking about where he went insane, that was the second time.
Okay.
Because he had this little bit of doubt. So there was a time he was in India, and Maharaji said, "Did you give me medicine last time you were here?" And Ram Dass says, "Yes." And he says, "Did I take it?" And Ram Dass says, "I think so." And he says, "You got any more?" So he gives him, this time he gives him 4 pills. And Maharaji goes like, he picks it up and he sticks out his tongue and very slowly
Drops him.
places the pill on the tongue, swallows it.
So very visible. So you can see it. Yep.
Then he says, "Can I take water? Hot water? Cold water?" And Ram Dass says it doesn't matter. So he calls for some water. Then he brings over one of his devotees with a watch. And he says, "How long will it take to kick in?" And Ram Dass says an hour. And so he's checking the guy's watch over and over and over again. And then finally, there was a point he threw his blanket over his head. And he put his head out. And his eyes were rolling. And his tongue was sticking out. And Ram Dass was like, "Oh my God, I've killed my guru."
Yeah. I remember this.
And then as soon as he had that thought, Maharaji dropped the whole thing. And then he sent him away. And it was that act was relieving Ram Dass of the attachment to those drugs because he hadn't been able to attain those states without them. And then he was showed how to. And he says in his lectures that he attained those same states and more through pranayama.
Right.
So Frank will often talk about the story of the 4-minute mile. Have you ever heard about the people breaking the 4-minute mile?
No.
So back in the day, it used to be said you couldn't break the 4-minute mile. It was too hard. Your heart would explode, etc. Well, as soon as somebody did it, then we had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. People begin to.
It's still a
this.
feat, but it's a belief structure that has been broken.
And as humans, we often need this sort of. We need to see it be done in order to know it's accomplishable.
Well, we're told that.
Exactly. And this is kind of what I see in the Ram Dass story, which is he saw what this guru was able to do. And Ram Dass, very well versed in, drugs and all that good stuff. He knew how much he was taking and the effects that would have. Yeah. And so to see him so easily, nope, doesn't affect me in the slightest type of thing.
Yeah.
That was so powerful for Ram Dass. At least I can imagine it that way.
Yeah, and that was, as a lot of devotees would say, the first miracle. When they talk about the miracle that brought Maharaji into their life. That was, that wasn't Ram Dass's first miracle. That was my first miracle. Yeah. But Ram Dass also talks about Maharaji's experience where he opened his heart. And then Ram Dass was like bawling for 3 days straight. And
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of us here sitting here, we came from the intellectual side of life.
Yeah.
Where, his guru didn't. And I talked about Sadhguru. Sadhguru was a mystic. He's very funny because he never read any spiritual books or anything. And I heard him having a talk with, what's his name? The guy we just covered.
Emmett Smith?
No.
Deepak.
Deepak Chopra.
Yep.
And Deepak Chopra came from the intellectual side. He was a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And then he's trying to let go of all that stuff. Where it's just funny when you listen to two of them talk back and forth. One already knows and the other one's trying to discover from a different angle. And Ram Dass, what do you call it? Sadhguru is like, you just got to stop the intellect and it will just fall into your lap. And I think when Ram Dass finally gets to a point where we let go of that intellectual side, is when it all came into play.
And as we all know, he came from that side,
Well, yeah.
Psychologist.
His dad was a lawyer,
etc.
You don't get hired in teaching at Harvard in the intellectual world.
And that's what I love about Ram Dass is he pokes fun at all that. Like, I grew up thinking I was this doctor. I was this person. I had these, goals. I was, a high member of society.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about Ram Dass.
And one of the things that Ram Dass talks about, which I think is very important on this journey, is his disillusionment. He talked about how he would be a Harvard professor, and all of he would have these rich talks about human development and human personality, and it was so like, oh, these guys really know. These guys really know. And he said, if we really know, we should really be grooving. Mm-hmm. But after work, he'd get in his bathtub and he'd be a wreck. He'd be a neurotic mess. And it was, he didn't know. Even through all of his doctorate degree at Harvard, teaching at Harvard, I don't think he got his doctorates there. But yeah, he rose to the top of this societal ladder in Western society, and he realized that he was still miserable.
Yeah. It's even worse when you get to the top.
Exactly.
And that misery is the thing that causes people to search for more. Yeah. And like
all of us went through that.
Yeah. And you'll see this with celebrities. A lot of celebrities are very spiritual people.
Great point.
And it's because like I heard this from Krishna Das, who's he's a kirtan singer, kirtan wala.
Familiar.
And he said these are the kings and queens of our society. They have the power, the financial power, and just status power,
recognition,
to
fame,
achieve anything they want. They can bed anybody they would wish to. They can buy anything they want to, and they can do all that, and they're still miserable.
Now, Krishna Das, if I'm not mistaken, he's the one that was actually supposed to be the lead singer for Blue Oyster Cult.
Really? Was he?
I didn't know that.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, so he if the same person, he went to India too.
Okay.
And what happened was he was on a path to doing drugs. He was into rock and roll and music and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So he went to India. Then he was told by his guru to leave, go back to America and sing. And that's how he came up with his music.
I have heard that story.
But what's funny is when he got back, he didn't know what to do. So he called his buddy up, and they just fired the lead singer. And he's telling the story, and he's like, the band. It was funny the way he said it. He goes, and the band happened to be Blue Oyster Cult, and he's like, how did I know? Because it became famous. But then he jokingly says, if I only knew, I would have went. But then he was only joking about it because he would have been a complete mess.
Yep.
And I don't think Maharaji said go back and sing. He said do what you want.
Yeah.
And there's a story where Krishna Das says, after he tells him to come back to America, the first thing Krishna Das says is, but I'm just learning Hindi.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things he says is, how will I serve you in America? And Maharaji sneers, and Krishna Das describes it as he looked like he just bit a sour pickle.
Yeah.
And he says, talk of service is not service.
Yeah.
And Krishna Das ended up singing because, I mean, I don't know, but I think that was his way of serving.
That was his passion. Yeah.
It was. And he says, by his grace, I can serve him.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with me going to this ashram.
Yeah.
By his grace, I'm able to go there. And like, it's the same.
Did you feel a calling to go there, or was it more, I want to have that experience? Like, what brought you to there? Did you feel like, oh no, I was called there?
I had a pretty dramatic, I'd say mental breakdown sort of thing. That was happening in my time in my first job. I was working at a warehouse.
Okay.
And it ended up with me quitting the job at the warehouse. That the dramaticness of that moment brought the ashram as a place I could go.
Okay.
It was sort of like, and I ended up going there for a weekend. And then after about a month or so, I went back for 3 weeks. And during those 3 weeks, I asked for a job, and they were like,
okay,
yeah, sure. But,
and where is this ashram?
it's in Taos, New Mexico.
Oh, right on.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. Fun, quirky little town Taos is.
Yeah.
That's cool. So
there's a lot of quirky places in New Mexico.
There are. There's a huge art community.
The elevation in Taos, New Mexico is 6969.
Is it?
There you go.
I didn't know that.
There's also, it's a very rich hub of spiritual type activity.
Yep.
Like there are, a handful of churches in the town, and it's a small town. There's the Lama Foundation about 30 minutes up the road. Okay. That's a retreat center that Ram Dass started. Mm-hmm. There's a rich history with Native American spirituality connected to that land. There's a rich extraterrestrial history about New Mexico as well. Yeah, I would like to say that Neem Karoli Baba chooses his temple locations very well.
Yeah.
And even though he wasn't in the body when that one was built, he still chose it.
He still chose it, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not overly commercialized like you see Sedona.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. But, all right. Nice.
So wait. When was this ashram constructed? Because I thought this was, I thought it would have been, during his lifetime.
I don't remember exactly when the ashram was constructed.
Okay.
It might have been during his lifetime.
Okay.
Maybe it was. He died in 1973. And I want to say it was made in the 70s, but it might have been the later 70s. Or construction was started in the 70s at least. Right. I'm not 100% sure. None of this is canon.
Did Guru, Karoli Baba, I don't want to screw up his name, but did he visit New Mexico? Like, is this ever a place that he actually walked?
Definitely.
Okay, definitely.
I mean, I imagine not. Okay. He was very infamous for showing up in two places at once.
Well, that's what I've heard. Some of the stories I've heard is the fact that, he has been able to manipulate matter.
There's a story where he's, this is in his wandering sadhu days before he started building temples, where he sat down to get his face shaved. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to the barber, or the barber was talking to him, and the barber was lamenting about how he hadn't seen his son and how he's probably going to die soon, and he would like to see his son before his passes, or something like that. And halfway through the shave, Maharaji stands up and he says, "I have to go pee." So he runs around the back corner, and then he does his thing, and then he comes back and he has the rest of his face shaved. And he says, "It will all be okay, just trust in God," to the barber. So then the next day, the barber's son comes, and he says, "What are you doing here?" And the barber says, "I'm not totally sure. I was working as a hotel manager in a city 200 miles away, and all of a sudden a man with his face half shaved comes in and says, 'Your father needs you. Here's a train ticket.'" And then he ran away.
Yeah.
So yeah.
God, I love that. That's how
Marvel came up with Flash Gordon.
Seriously though. Seriously, you hear about stuff like this, and
it's unexplainable from the linear perspective and the way we're isolated in our thinking.
See, that's exactly it. All of that is 100% possible in this current reality, but we have been taught, that couldn't happen within the confines.
And that's starting to break down, because even in the idea of quantum physics, it's starting to explain
that. It exists, yeah, and that's where I love our new science is taking us.
Yeah.
That, of course, these are real possibilities.
But the new science is going to have to let go of being science, because it's still intellectual. And that, you get to a point where it's like, okay, how much more? Like this, the idea of this has been around, and we've been in a framework of having to explain it.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Kys, so how did you approach your family? Like, let's start with like your family or friends. How'd you tell them, "Hey guys, I'm gonna go to an ashram"? I don't know how long. How did they react? Like, how did your mom and dad react?
Kind of just like that. I said,
yeah.
I mean, I went there for the weekend, then I went there for the 3 weeks. My father still doesn't know. He's on a cross-country road trip thing.
Okay.
And
for work?
No, he's a freelance photographer.
Okay, cool.
I should probably text him and tell him that.
Should probably let him know.
I'll probably call him. That seems like a better thing to do.
Yeah, text him. Hey, Dad.
Go to an ashram. See you later.
Yeah, my mother was resistant at first, and I can't really blame her. Yeah. I got into this path in it entered me very steeply, and it caused led to a lot of fanaticism, and there was a certain 1 year time period where it was the only thing I could talk about. Yeah, and that was also very awkward, because I was still I was in a marching band at that time, surrounded by not very spiritual people, not spiritual.
Expressive.
They didn't really seem expressive of it. So my mom is accepting of it. She's going to come visit.
Are your parents artsy types? Like you said, your dad's a photographer. Yeah. That's why I figured I'd kind of mention it. Like, have you been I came from kind of like a hard class, like a working class family. Both my parents were intellectuals, but had a college degree and stuff like that. But they weren't like artsy. Like, I was never raised on.
I don't know. I don't really know how to explain my parents' minds. Like, I can explain my projections of them, but that's just my own projection.
Would you say you grew up in a strict household?
No.
Okay. So you're pretty free thinking, etc. There wasn't a certain religion that was pushed on you. Or
No,
anything like that?
My mother was raised Catholic, and then she stopped. She dislikes organized religion, which I think is one of the reasons she was hesitant of me moving to the ashram, which is understandable because organized religion has a lot of bullshit. But the only difference is that I feel like I'm coming into this in a very positive way, and it's becoming a positive thing for me. Organized religion can be a very negative thing for a lot of people. Yeah, and I think I've met people. And it
can also be a positive, as you know.
Yeah, and I met people in the town who that temple was a negative impact on them. They grew up there, and it's just difficult growing up in a I don't know if dogmatic is the right word, but a particular type of faith. Growing up saying, I like to think this way. I'm not a parent. I'm definitely not a parent, but it's hard to be a parent because, especially in this day and age.
Frank's a parent. He knows.
Yeah.
He has a son.
Our minds are full of shit, and you don't even have to try to do it. You're going to end up projecting that shit onto the kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's well built into what we call our subconscious. It's about recognizing that and becoming aware of it.
Yeah.
But
yeah. There's no way to perfectly parent. You can't raise a kid to the point where he's enlightened.
Well, it's very funny because I feel like growing up, our parents have often, or at least how I experienced it, was like we were seen as like an extension of that person. And so parents, they'd want you to do well in school, get a good job, all these types of things because you were an extension of them. And I always felt that was so wrong. And, growing up, I was like, why am I always like, have to be seen as this, or I need to be seen in this light? And I feel like that's where we go wrong with our parenting is we try to, if we grew up in a world where we were taught, hey, our kids are their own beings that choose to come to this planet to remember who they are, and you're here to learn from them as much as they are here to learn from you. Yeah. We would parent in a totally different light.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, we don't live in that world. Our parents were conditioned just like we were conditioned. Correct. And that cycle goes back to
thousands of years and generations.
But it's interesting, though. But even that said, it's like, I don't want to use the word escape, but you're transcending that now.
Correct.
Ram Dass, Richard Albert transcended it. So it's like he even got to a point where he didn't blame his parents. It's very interesting because would he have gotten to the heights of his physical experience of life and the way he lived it if it wasn't even for that upbringing? And he'll even say, I don't fully know it, but I can't deny that pushed me over the edge. And maybe there is this greater story out there forcing us into this place. If we were like, can you imagine being the son of Maharaji? What would that be?
And
maybe you've been a rock star after that.
Maharaji had 3 kids.
Yeah. So,
did he? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
I'm pretty sure after his passing, all 3 of them became devotees of his.
So wait, he was a wandering sadhu, correct?
He was a wandering sadhu. He didn't really spend too much time in the home. It wasn't really the father's role to be super present in the home.
Okay.
He comes from a very traditional Hindu society.
Okay.
Like mother needs permission to leave the house traditional.
Okay.
So yeah, there are stories like there was a story where his wife said to him, the children, you leave and then the children are sick or there's no food and what do I do? And he says, if the children are ever sick, if the children fall sick in the morning, I will be there by evening. If the children fall sick in the evening, I will be there by the next morning. And he stuck to that. Every time someone was sick, every time someone had something fall upon them, he was there for his kids. So, I'm not, I can't really speak on the parenting qualifications of Maharaji.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's like no one knows what the perfect parenting.
Well, there is no such thing.
Yeah, so when you become a parent, it's like, when I look at it from my son. Yeah. My son is teaching me how to parent.
Yeah.
Now he's 19, so it's a whole different understanding. I've learned that early on. It's like I don't parent him. He teaches me how to be a parent.
And that's what I feel like the relationship should be like is, hey, we're both here helping each other learn about ourselves.
Yeah. But at the same time, I was still indoctrinated with the shit my parents told me.
Of course.
That would come out. So
Of course.
And what I listened to a Ram Dass talk about conscious parenting, and he talked about how to try your best and try. You can't really try with these sort of things, but recognize that both you and your child are just two souls.
Yep.
And you're just taking the role of parent and child, and it's and you go from there.
Yeah.
And in other lifetimes, it could be reversed.
Yeah. Don't get lost in that. There's a story of a saint, and he was with a devotee, and they were looking at this sort of beautiful, very picturesque thing. Like there was a woman eating a chicken leg, and it was like sort of pushing the dog away because he was trying to eat the leg, and a girl holding a baby. And the saint starts laughing, and the devotee says, "Oh, Babaji, why are you laughing?" And he says, "Because that woman there is eating her husband, kicking her friend, and nursing her enemy."
Yeah.
That's good. You know?
Because, who knows what we were before this lifetime, before this incarnation.
Yeah.
And
I look at from the fractal understanding of life, and I talk about this too. It's like a better understanding is like actors. You take a group of actors that have been in multitudes of movies together. So if you would say the soul of them was like Robert De Niro, Jennifer Lawrence, and Bradley Cooper, but every movie that was different, they played a different role onto each other. Yeah. So understanding that gives a better conceptual, if we need a conceptual understanding of, we don't know what the next role will be or where we came from. And this is where, when you start to learn this, you refrain from the aspect of judgment of knowing what you're supposed to do in the moment in which you are will disappear.
I like where you're going with that. Kai, what is your opinion on judgment, measurement, and just, this experience? Because, I feel like the human experience is a constant state of observing, measuring, and judging. And that's why we collapse matter and create this very materialistic world. Like, how do you view judgment? Or
I think judging is the state of the mind.
Yep.
The mind looks at something and it will immediately try to create a definition for it and a measurement basis on it.
Assign a role to it.
Yeah, and I haven't figured out a way to stop this from happening yet.
Either way.
We're all working on it.
That's what perspective show's about.
We're all working on it. It's becoming aware to that.
Yeah. I liked your story about God plunging you into a pit of hell and then showing you it was an illusion. Because when I hear the Christians talk about hell, I like, maybe there are hell plans. Like Hinduism talks about hell lokas, and I don't really like to discredit anything as false.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of it is just states of mind.
Yeah.
You can be in a state of mind where everything makes you suffer. And like Buddha talked about this, that suffering is inherent in the way that the mind works.
One of the first noble truths is life is suffering.
Yeah, because you're going to get something that you like, and it's going to give you a little taste of that thing that you want, and then that taste is going to leave. And then immediately we're searching for the next thing, next thing that's going to give us that.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's like Ramdas said. That's why we're always tripping ourselves to try to, we're grasping, and
we stay stuck in that.
Yeah. Or we try to get really clever and get ahead of it, and we never do.
Yeah.
Because whatever it is we want is always forever fleeting.
There's a saint in India named Anandamayi Ma.
Okay.
She lived around the same time as Neem Karoli Baba, and she said that the reason that these things are so the reason that none of this makes us happy is because the thing that we're searching for is a thing called Sat Chit Ananda, which is
consciousness, existence, bliss.
Yeah, it's what we were, where we were at when we were in the womb, or before we were in the womb.
Yeah.
There was no sense of self. There was no other. You had food coming in. You had all of the things that you need. I've never heard of it
from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost, we're trying to return home.
Yeah, that's
in essence, yeah.
Sat Chit Ananda, consciousness, bliss, right? Yeah. Isn't that, is it consciousness, experience, bliss? That's what it stands for, those words. Sat Chit Ananda.
I know Ananda means bliss, I believe.
Okay.
It's
consciousness, or existence, consciousness, bliss. It's one of the, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to see that.
Sat Chit Ananda.
It's consciousness, wisdom, and bliss.
Okay.
Yeah. Eternal knowledge, eternal
And
presence.
How does she relate
eternal.
that to the womb again?
She doesn't relate it to the womb.
Oh, okay.
Ram Dass relates it to the womb, and some other yogis and whatnot have also. I've heard that, but Ananda Mai Ma doesn't expressly make that analogy.
Okay.
But what she says is that we crave for that thing because that's where we came from before we were in the womb, before creation, when we were still just
one with source,
an awareness. Yeah, that was in light.
Yeah. Let there be light.
Yeah, so we're really in an experience or experimental experience coming into Earth.
Yeah.
And you hear these are all analogies and concepts. There's no real, like, when I've studied other type of forms of like hermetics and stuff like that. They call this a half truth. And it's my half truth is the way I explain the moment in which I'm in. And the reason it's a half truth because it doesn't play out across the universe. But nonetheless, that's why we hold on to a half truth. But this thing that is fleeting, we're trying to slow it down, and you can't. Other than move at the speed of it to where you don't notice it's moving.
Yeah.
And Einstein helped out with that theory, to a degree, intellectually anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, how do we do that? I'm like, we're all trying our best. But I know when I let go of something, when I let go of the branch in the middle of the river, all of a sudden the river is no longer powerful because I'm moving with it.
Mm-hmm.
It was the branch that showed me how powerful the river was.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had to give out and let go of it, then move with the flow of the river, and all of a sudden now I'm one with the river. And that's kind of what we're trying to get to, is just letting go and moving with the flow of life.
And hanging on, I really like what you said about hanging on to the branch to show you how powerful the river is, because that feels, to me, what I heard is hanging on to the branch is kind of like sitting down to meditate and realizing just how fast your mind is moving.
Yeah.
And just how shitty you are at really staying in the moment.
It's a good way to say
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the only practice, and you can't even really say this, that Neem Karoli Baba ever prescribed was japa meditation, which means repetition of the name.
Okay.
The particular name that he did was Ram.
Yeah. I've heard that too.
Yeah, he said, through the repetition of the name, all things are accomplished. I'm not going to tell you the stories there, but that's always the punchline of the story, is that through the repetition of the name, all things are brought to fullness and fruition.
Yeah.
Is that because we are able to take our mind off of the constant running in multiple directions?
Maybe. It's he would say, there's a poem by Rumi. No, that's not the point I'm trying to make. He would say, go on chanting your fake Ram Ram.
Okay.
One day you will say the real Ram, and then Ram will show up. So these names that you say are a call. You are calling on God during this.
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you think he's getting at with that? Do you think it's like the other methods you're doing outside of that? Is that what he means by this chant of the false ROM?
He means we're saying it and we're not paying any attention.
Yeah.
We aren't understanding what ROM really means.
Yeah.
We aren't understanding what these names actually are, because the mind can't understand these things. There's no Saint John of the Cross. I'm gonna totally paraphrase, but he said, all the things that the mind can conceive of, all the things that you can think, all the things that you can feel, are not an approximate means of union with God.
No.
All of the things that are available to us through our senses aren't gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
Only God can create God. And Ram Dass always talked about purification processes, cooling the mind out, getting the body straight, not like sexually straight, but just like energetically straight.
Absolutely.
And the idea is that we're trying to get out of our own way, because God is already there. That's one of the things you can realize, like when you do psychedelics or something like that God is always present in every moment in their fullness. It's just us that aren't paying attention. We're lost in this worldly we're lost in samsara, lost in illusion.
Yeah.
And we are trying to find a way to never forget, because we've all remembered once or twice. We might write it off as insanity, but we've all had an experience of remembrance.
Yeah.
And most all of us forget instantly.
Yeah.
Again, we just go out and then it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Alan Watts called it the game of hide and seek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
He did. I remember that.
like there's a story of the story of a Saint Ramana Maharshi.
Mm-hmm.
And his story, he never did practice. He never did anything like that. He was a 17-year-old teenager. He hadn't had any sort of spiritual thoughts ever. And then all of a sudden, when he was sitting in his relative's study, he had the feeling that he was going to die. And so he said, all right, I'm going to die. What shall I do? And so he laid down and he pretended to die. And he experienced the death of his body. And then he realized, oh, even though the body is dead, I am still here. I am not the body. I am the deathless spirit. I must be the deathless spirit. Just like, oh, just that easy, huh? Mm-hmm. And then he went on. And then the thing is about him is that he made connection with the true self, and then he never unbroke that connection. He got instant enlightenment, as they say.
Yep.
Which sounds real nice.
I know, right? That's how I felt when I read Eckhart Tolle. He talks about this instant feeling out. I'm like, that wasn't me.
Yeah, and then he talks about how he then Ramana Maharshi went on to, sit for years in temples, cooling the system out. And that's like the Buddha talks about, or after the Buddha got enlightened, he sat for 60 days in his supreme bliss. Mm-hmm. And one way you could look at that, I don't know if it's true, but one way you could look at that is that was the body getting all the things in place, getting all that energy that it needed into the system, and distilling it in such a way that you can still walk around and be with the world whilst also being one with the entire universe.
Yeah, and I think that's it's like you're in the world but not of it type of idea.
Yeah,
because we came here for a reason. It wasn't just to sit in a corner.
Absolutely.
But how do we interact without being consumed by the world?
Correct.
Yeah,
and that's
that's why we and it's probably about 15 years I started doing transcendental meditation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And same thing, you go through a ceremony, they give you a mantra, and the purpose of the mantra and pretty much what you do, there's no meaning to it. So you have no definition of it when it's given to you. And if you say it over and over, you don't know it. But all of a sudden, when you say it so much, it flees and it disappears. And in that moment, you find something. And right when you find it, my mind's like, oh, shit. And then, boom, start over again.
Picks back up.
So when you could stay in that state long enough, you get more familiar with that feeling. And it starts to arise. But even you have to let go of the mantra or else that holds you.
Hence the reason Nareen Kali Baba,
It's subtle.
Wrong.
It's subtle, and it lasts a moment. But, like, if I could only be there in a moment in a day, I am okay with that. But the truth is I want to be there more.
Yeah.
But wanting to be there more is why I'm not there more. Mm-hmm. It's a paradox.
It's in the need of the want.
But that's the pull.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's important.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yes.
And the thing about japa meditation, or just using a word in your mind, is that you can do it any time of the day.
Yeah.
It's a way to instantly bring your awareness. It's a way to instantly catch your awareness.
What do you use? Give us an example.
Well, Maharaji said ROM.
Okay.
And that's a very popular...
So you'll use ROM?
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a way that you can always continuously bring yourself back to that awareness state. And even if you're only in there for like 1 millisecond, and you'll get there for a second, and then you're not going to be there again for 50 hours. Mm-hmm. But you were still there. And those seconds, when we come back, that plants a seed. Yeah. And that starts something. And that's why a practice is so important. Yeah. Because when we're trying to be aware, when we're trying to cool ourselves down, we have to, like, you can't just get enlightened. You got to practice at being enlightened. Because the thing is, we're all already enlightened beings. Yeah. Everybody already has the fullness of the spirit inside them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like setting up a lighthouse. So the lighthouse, because having the idea of ROM lets you know, even if you're frustrated, okay, I'm going to start saying this. So like even if you don't get to that exact place you want to, you're diminishing the idea of the frustration just by knowing it's in you. So the lighthouse allows the fisherman to get back to shore, even in the deepest fog. Mm-hmm. So planting that is knowing I can get there, where prior to this, you had no idea it was even existing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where it becomes very scary to people. So I can get frustrated, but I know I can get back there. I just have to
let go.
Yeah, if I get overly frustrated for me isn't much today. Mm-hmm. It kicks me back into doing the practice, where I'm like, oh, and I start laughing. Like, all right, and all of a sudden, just in that moment, I know I can see the lighthouse, but it doesn't mean I'm ready to dock my boat yet. But at least I'm moving in the direction in which the lighthouse is showing me, so I don't crash into the shore.
Yeah.
And that's all I need to know in that moment. That's all I could see it. That's it. And in that moment, all of a sudden I feel everything calm down. And next thing you know, I'm making my way to the dock. And it's like, wow. And then you get off the dock and you forget about the lighthouse.
So Kai, do you use these daily practices?
Yeah.
Like, do you find yourself in it? Do you only use them during, like, do you use it while you're driving, or is it more just when you feel yourself steering off course, getting too wrapped up in the 3D? When do you use it?
You can use it whenever you want. I suppose the goal is to use it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just like, you can't, sit down and start doing breathing exercises just in the middle of working.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can
one day
repeat
you might
a
be
name.
able to do a certain job, right?
Yeah.
And when I mean daily practice, I mean a place where the only thing that you are conscious of, you are making an effort to only be conscious of your thoughts.
Yeah.
You are, a lot of people call that meditation. Mm-hmm. You can call it meditation if you want. You can call it devotional chanting. Mm-hmm. A lot of these stuff like asanas, putting yourself in postures. Pranayama is a way of moving energy through our body that creates the same effects. Mm-hmm. It will create a type of meditational space in which you can watch your thoughts. Or it creates a space of freedom from your thoughts, if only just for a moment. Yeah. That's the...
And you probably experienced that when you were in dance.
Yeah.
Like you lose yourself in it to where there's no thought. And yeah.
It wasn't exactly that there was no thought. It was that I couldn't hold on to them.
Yeah.
I was so busy manipulating my body, and any thought that came in, I would just have to let it go.
Yeah.
I would have anxiety about some sort of thing, and I would just have to let that go because because I would notice how the anxiety would affect, because it takes away from your energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we give chi to our thoughts, it takes away the chi that we can be using in the moment.
And that's where, honestly, a lot of us are struggling out, know, in the Western world, is so much of that chi is being dispersed of, future worries, past. We're never here.
Because the truth is, it's like a thought is something that permeates, but we have the ability to let it go if we learn to do that. Absolutely. It's kind of like watching a monkey in a cage. If you mimicked everything the monkey did in a 5-minute period, you'd be exhausted. Mm-hmm. But if you just sat on the bench and watched the monkey, and it's kind of like letting the thoughts go by, it has less effect or a pull on you. And that's become sort of practice. It's not about stopping the thought. It's about letting it blow by you. Yeah. Don't attach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't stop thoughts.
No.
That's not something.
It's like stopping the wind. But you can become very aerodynamic to where the wind has less effect on you.
And the thing is, when you're watching the monkey, it's very easy to say, I am not that monkey. Yeah. It's much harder to say, I am not that thought.
Yeah, well, yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what the practice is for. Mm-hmm. So you can practice that letting go and coming back to whatever your practice is, watching the breath, saying a name, whatever.
Do you watch the breath?
I did for a bit, and I still, tend to.
What method do you find the most, or did you personally find the most helpful?
Japa has been the most helpful for me.
Yeah.
Okay. And, my path is different than everybody else's on this entire planet.
Yeah, but the cool thing about, is just hearing your story right now, in some people look at this transformation could be over, years, and here you are making this pretty pivotal point in like
your growth.
Yeah, growth. It happened fairly quickly. So the cool thing about like people that may tune into this podcast will see there's multitudes of understanding, because some people say, oh, it takes forever. I remember Terrence McKenna would jokingly say this. He'd be like, yeah, I've heard of people doing these mantras and meditating, and after 20 years they made it to this place. But God, if you take shrooms in 45 minutes, you'll get there. And it was funny the way he said it, because a lot of people agreed with it.
Yeah.
But the
thing is, you got to leave that place after a couple hours.
Exactly. And so there was a point where he was right, but there's a point he's missing as well. Because
another thing that Terrence...
Staying there.
Yeah.
Another thing Terrence McKenna said, he said that the swamis going into the ashram, their knees would not be buckling in terror about the dimensions that they were about to undertake, like you would if you were about to smoke DMT.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when you're trying to attain these things in a sober state of consciousness, you're not going to get them until your knees are going to stop buckling in fear.
Yeah.
Because, fear is a big part of going into these different states of consciousness, because when you're in a place that's unfamiliar inside of your mind, one of the first thoughts, especially in this society, is I'm going insane.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of letting go again. And what's going to happen is you're going to be brought up, and then you're going to start thinking, and it's going to bring you right back down. And it's only when you are able to stay narrow, stay straight, again, not in a sexual context, that you're going to be able to, the universe will unfold in front of you.
Yeah.
And you're able to see that. And
that's the biblical understanding of the camel through the eye of the needle.
Exactly.
So when you actually understand breakdown, like you could get through that narrow pathway. But you have to let go of everything that you've accumulated throughout life, in thoughts as well. And there is something to this, but it can't be found intellectually, even like, hopefully people will set them on a practice, but listeners' podcasts won't enlighten anybody.
No, it's the work.
It's
you do.
It's fascinating how people can just like something hits them. Like with me, at moments something hit me. It wasn't because I read the book and finished it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the book, I was led to the book to have maybe more of an intellectual understanding of what the hell I just went through. Like you're heading off to understand more of like what happened. And obviously the cool thing is you'll be around what we call like-minded people, so it'll be easier to stay on that straight and narrow, so to speak.
What is your role at the ashram, Kai?
Caretaker.
Okay, so caretaker.
I will be. I'm also going to be doing training to be a pujari.
Okay,
which is the person who leads the. They don't do sermons; they just chant. But going to be maintaining the grounds and whatnot.
Will you be? Is there any type of like work that you must do amongst the members of the ashram? Like, is there anything
visitors?
Visitors, or like, do you have to do any type of like one-on-one work or any coaching, or is there anything like that involved?
I don't think I'm sure I'm going to be getting some sort of training as to how to clean the bathrooms and whatnot. One of the things that you do is if somebody visiting the ashram comes to you with a need, it's your responsibility at that point to say, yes, I can fulfill that, or no, we cannot fulfill that.
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's how it worked.
And that's just that's the job, I guess. And
if you think about every job out there, even from the physical realm, that's the same thing. It's what we do.
It's
but in the way we live our world, it's like, well, how much money are you going to pay me?
Yeah, exactly. A totally different type of world.
And this is not really different than a normal job. This isn't. I'm still very much in the world. I've still got all my desires. I've still got all.
Still got to chop the wood and gather the water. So
everybody else in the ashram still has all their desires and whatnot.
Yeah.
We are in an institution that is centered around God, but it's still an institution.
Yeah,
and it's still an institution in the Kali Yuga.
Do you believe that everybody is on the same or at the same level of understanding that you're at, in the sense of, do they have a good grasp of this before they go into an ashram? Or is it ever like the type of thing where somebody's just like raised in it from birth and, that's all they've ever known, or that they're brought there by someone? Like, do you actually have to have an understanding of the concepts that we're going over before you can work or be part of an ashram?
I don't know.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, if the manager says you can work there, then you can work there.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, if Maharaji says you can work there, then you can work there.
But I imagine a person that would seek out this type of thing has a different understanding than like.
Of course. I'm just trying to understand.
To what level?
Like, is it the type of thing where somebody who's not familiar with these concepts, could be a part of it, or would stumble upon this or something like that?
Well, and like these concepts are just concepts.
Yeah.
Just more thoughts to add to the other pile of equally bullshit thoughts.
Yeah.
And everybody everybody ultimately is on the path to the same place. We're all going to God, whether we know it or not. That's where we're going to end up.
Yeah.
Either in this life or 50 lives from now.
Yeah, it's true.
There's no other place to go. We can think that we're trying to make money, or we can think that we're trying to get a hot babe.
Yeah.
But it's just
good example.
we're looking for that same feeling, that feeling of that Ram Dass talked about, that like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That momentary fleeting thing that you can't ever grab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And the thing that I believe is the thing about God is that is where that source. That's where the lasting stuff is. That's the nectar
where we came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, like, hey, I live in the 3D world. I run a business. I do all this stuff. But when I'll get caught up once in a while, not as much as I used to, in the worrisome, if this doesn't happen, this will be a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens now, I step back and almost say my Ram, and I laugh. But the situation did not change, but I just allowed it to flow. I actually undammed the idea of me, and I feel good. And what's interesting, though, when that happens for me, all of a sudden I'm shown the situation happened, which did, how to navigate through it so it actually helps me in the worldly place as well. It's weird. I could see it from a different viewpoint, so it's not just about putting up with. It's like, wow, holy cow. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be very interesting. But again, I'm the one who created the dam in the first place. It wasn't brought to me. I created it in order for the water to build up and create the pressure within me.
Yeah.
So I created the problem, and the solution then was on the other side of that problem. So if I didn't create the problem, I wouldn't need the solution.
Mm-hmm. But at least you created the solution.
Yeah, and the solution was if the tails is the problem, the head of the quarter was the solution, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But yet at the end of the day, it's just 25-cent piece. And if you could look at that from more, and that's kind of like how we started the show, perspective shift. We're just offering a different perspective, and as we move our perspective around this thing we call life, you have to let go of one in order to grab onto another. But that interim of letting go is where you find God. Mm-hmm. I made up this thing called the monkey bar theory.
Yeah, I love it.
But people are like, well, how do I let go? I'm like, well, grab onto something else, and the nature of life is you'll let go of the thing behind you, like in the monkey bars. But there's this moment of fluidity where you're not touch one bar if you get really good, and you let go of the other one simultaneously. That's the moment, the space in between each note, the silence between each word. Mm-hmm. That's really what we're coming out of.
Yeah.
And if I could just touch that for a moment, so it's not the bar I'm grabbing or letting go of, it's that moment when I'm actually not touching anything. And if it takes me to do monkey bars all day long to get to that point, I'll do it. I don't care, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And it's just that moment. It's the silence and the space that we're really in search for. Where before I was in search for another bar, another note. Now I'm like, no, I want the space in between the note. And I know it's there. And when I let go of the note or the sound, oh, there it is. And, oh, there it is again.
And that's something that, all the greats, Maharishi, Ram Dass, everybody talks about, that silence.
Yeah.
It's in that silence that we find our true selves, or find God.
Yep, and we get enough energy to speak again.
well, that's it. And then right back into it.
Yeah.
Have some fun in this.
Yeah.
But,
as I get older, I'm 55. And,
yeah.
Say my lifespan goes to 90 or 100. Mm-hmm. I'm like, there's something comforting knowing that I'm more closer to home than I was before. Now, when you're younger, you don't want to think that. And it's not, it's a thought I think about briefly. I don't focus on it. But there is something nice about this. I think we experience it every day going to bed. No one remembers falling asleep. But you wake up like, oh,
jolting away.
Yeah. So there is a replication or a sequence of things that we see already happening. And people are like, well, how do we know? I'm like, well, think about this. A biologist will tell you every 7 years your body's reconstructed. So until I look at my yearbook picture, I don't realize that body's dead. But what's in me, the witnesser of that body at 18, the body that's witnessing me now at 55, isn't dead. And that I understand, so I no longer worry or think about death anymore because I've died many times. And I didn't notice it until I looked at my yearbook picture. I'm like, damn, from the act of comparison. But then, again, the next day I lose myself in that. And it's like, okay. But I noticed my practice is keeping me closer to that hub than before I didn't even know it existed. And now I know it exists. Anxiety is the starting point for me to get back there, which I don't, stay too much into anxiety anymore. It's almost like it wakes me up. It's like the cold water. Oh, all right.
And it's a relabeling of the energy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I always like to do that. Anytime I feel quote unquote anxious, quote unquote depressed, any type of these feelings, I try to take that and be the alchemist we all are.
Yeah.
Transmute that energy.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I'm experiencing this feeling as that, and I've assigned that, name to this feeling or experience. How can I now take this energy and grow from it, learn from it, transmute it?
Yeah.
Kai, what's something you want to share with just listeners at home that helped you on an individual level learn more about yourself, or maybe I should say remember who you really are? What's some good words of advice or words of wisdom or...
Take it easy.
I like that.
But take it.
Yeah.
Don't... it's a quote from Terrence McKenna. And he was talking about mushrooms, but I think it's very applicable to life.
Yeah. His life is one big mushroom.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
a trip.
As as Grateful Dead says, what a long, strange trip it is.
Yeah.
Just try not to think about things too hard and do your best to go about the world in a good way.
Yeah.
And try not to worry.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because I look at life as a game, but I don't trivialize it at all. It's an important game to me. It's fun, but it just is that. And
the more pressure, the more ideas, the more all that is just more thought, more mind that we're putting on top of it.
Yeah, and I've gained a lot of experience in life to where it's so much easier to be at ease. Because after 55 years of holding on to something, like I just gained calluses. That's it.
Yeah. What did this do for me? But that's why I love having a conversation like this.
Yeah.
I can turn to somebody like Frank that I trust and hear you talk about this. And
dude, it doesn't change
you trust
when you turn 40.
Yeah.
It doesn't change when you turn 50.
Yeah, you trust the concept of me.
There you go. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's nice to have this type of setting to understand and see like, oh, wow, okay. You know, I always thought like, what's next when I was growing up? Or I'll feel different, when I'm an adult, when I was a kid. Or I'll feel different when. And it's just all that head noise.
Yeah.
Constant chatter.
All right. So we celebrate you because I love the journey you're on.
Thank you.
It's not easy,
Well, it's not easy till it is.
Yep.
I don't know if you can speak of this, but I think it was more difficult prior to this journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of easy.
I was gonna say, it probably feels good.
Yeah. Like, because prior to it, it was probably difficult.
It feels looser.
Yeah, which is an ease onto itself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, man.
Well, thank you, Kai, for joining us this week. It was awesome to have you on, the show with us. We would love to have you back, especially, I don't know how it works with the ashram, but after your experience there, working there and experiencing that, we'd love to have you back on.
We bless you on your journey, man.
Thank
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good luck to you. Enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Well, guys, if you like what you heard, go ahead and subscribe at the button below. You'll see more content, like this each week. Let us know if there's anything you guys have questions at home about. You can direct these questions. If you have questions for Kai, reach out to us, and we'll reach back to him. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see y'all in a week.
All right. Peace out.
Thanks, Kai.
All right.
Rom,
Thank
rom.
you.